Hey, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. This is Negotiator and RN, and this is Being the Space, a podcast where we talk about what are we being the space for in life and how are we pivoting, adapting, and changing to meet the needs of ourselves, our communities, the marketplace, and what's going on in current events. How are we solving the world's problems? So today we have a really great, amazing guest. I'm so happy she was able to join us, Caryn Isaacs, Aging Icons. She has I'm going to let her introduce herself because she's just an amazing person and has such a rich, diverse background. And I hope folks tune in to her background and her story that really shows that we will continue to grow as we age and change. And we're never locked into anything. There's not one thing that we have to do for the rest of our life. We get to change and just keep growing. So, with all that, I'm going to hand it over to Caryn so she can give an introduction, introduce herself, tell us, a little bit more about yourself, Caryn. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to get the word out about Aging Icon. And I am Caryn Isaacs. It's ISAACS, and I am an aging icon. So, for you to know if you're an aging icon, uh, you would decide that it's time for you to look at possibly things that are happening that you haven't been able to do the same way. So you've reached a certain age, you can't do things exactly the way that you did, but you've lived a life full of accomplishment and you want to continue doing the things that fulfill you. And you want to leave a legacy. And you know that you can't do it alone. And you've been a leader. And if these things resonate with you, then you are an aging icon. And this is what's happening to me in my life. I have gray hair. My jowls are a little bit lower than they used to be. And a lot of people know me for being around a long time and doing, so many things. People say, you did that too? You did that too? And yes, I did that because I've been here a long time. And so a lot of the things that I did led me to this path that I'm on now.
Thank you. That's right. It's interesting. A lot of people say to me, "Oh my gosh, you've had so many jobs. You've done so many things." And well, yeah, why not? I mean, when you have opportunities, sometimes you're going to end up doing multiple jobs or multiple roles or contracts or projects. And for me, a lot of my life is from a very young age has been spent volunteering. So that adds layers onto it. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your background as far as like how did you end up today, 2023, where you are saying, hey, I'm going to be this advocate, a voice for aging icons, for how to, would you say aging well or aging, how would you, who are your, like, who are the people that are going to get you on the phone and say, hey, I love what Caryn's saying, right? But talk a little bit about how you got here.
Yeah. So in every incantation of business I've been in, people say, I've never heard of that. And that's when I know I'm on the right track. So when I first decided that I wanted to have my own business, I had been working for some time in healthcare and in health insurance companies. And I knew a lot of doctors. And I was up to a point where I could either go into the corporate hierarchy, or I could go out on my own. And I was lucky that I was married. My husband was very supportive. And so I was able to start a company originally with the idea of helping doctors to transition from being employees to being owners, but in the modern day, because I did this in 1976 when doctors could first start to advertise. And once they could advertise, it opened up a whole different thing where there was now competition. You didn't just sit there and get funneled to the patients. And so
I want to pause just for a minute so folks understand this, because they're saying 1976, and this is in the state of New York. Maybe I didn't even know this. It was illegal for doctors to advertise their services.
Yes. Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yes.
If
It
you
was
can even
considered
imagine
unprofessional.
that.
And so a
Interesting.
law had to be made.
I think we froze. I think you're frozen.
Okay.
I'll let you come back. Here you are. Now you're back. Okay. No problem.
Right.
These things happen.
So,
It's just,
yeah,
you
so
know, like,
many doctors thought it was unprofessional. So the types of doctors that were willing to work with me, especially a woman in business in 1976, also was not a usual thing. And
right.
so, right, and so a lot of the doctors were minorities and were immigrant doctors. So I worked with the Chinese community. I worked with doctors with who maybe had some other disabilities and didn't look so good, weren't what people would think of when they saw the doctor on television. It wasn't Dr. Kildare or, the handsome Harvard trained doctor. Yet these doctors had passion. And that's really the word that I like to use now, that I brought forward to use now, that people want to continue their life's passion means that this is something that you just have in you. You don't learn it in college. Nobody can tell you this is what you want to do. I hear many stories now of people, especially in patriarchal communities, where people are told it's expected of you. Your family says, we did all of this for you so you could be a doctor or a lawyer or go into the business with the family. And you can't help it. If you have a passion, it's something that's just in you, whether it was music, developing the robots, developing getting the
Any kind of innovation. I mean, and
any kind
sometimes,
of innovation, yeah.
sometimes our passions are, the world has yet to meet our passion, right? So imagine whoever's passionate about AI, for example, right? You wouldn't
Yes.
know that that would be a passion you had 20 years ago, or you know what I'm saying? So sometimes that's why it's so important to be willing to pivot and be open-minded and realize, we're not in these tracks. But I totally get what you're saying. Of course, that's still an issue about like kind of these, what you're saying, these patriarchal cultures that are also have this expectation, you're going to be a doctor, lawyer, that's it, right? And forget about what you like, what you love, what makes you happy. This is what you're going to go do. And many of us know doctors that obviously are in that group. I've worked with plenty of new doctors who it was clear they had, got done all this work, 10 years of school, right? And had no desire to be a doctor, and
But
it lands.
to be with a patient, to be with a patient. And there wasn't really, if you don't know, they say you don't know what you don't know. So I knew my family was civil servants. And my father was a rehabilitation counselor for the state, and my mother ran campaigns, uh, political campaigns. And so I had been brought up with, I say I was the little child in the carriage with a pen standing by the supermarket asking people if they needed a ride to the polls, and they would sign the petition. I love to organize people. And so when I looked at how can I advertise these people, do something different not just to differentiate them because they were different, how do we get them to their market, and how do we get people to be open to what they have to say? And so I did that through uh, arranging relationships with unions and certain companies. And I found that, a home with the unions, because that was really their role, was to fight for what the people didn't have, to give them a chance uh, to find services that maybe were lacking even in the general public, and being able to offer that to their members. And
Hmm.
so I learned through being able to their generosity to allow me to be part of that, and to bring in that. Even today, I speak at some of the union groups, and people say, come back, come back. We all know each other. And they're people that I know. Those are my family. And that's how
Beautiful.
was for all of those doctors. And so I had like a stable of doctors. And one of the doctors said to me, his father was the head of the medical system in Russia. And he said, I'm a big doctor. You've made me a millionaire, but I feel very unfulfilled, and I want to see if I can do something else. And so I went to California, because in New York, there was no managed care,
Hmm.
and learned about what managed care meant, all the different parts of it. And we started a physician-owned HMO.
Wow.
Um, and so that was in 93.
Wow.
And then from there, um, I say, we sort of put healthcare into a path, which I don't, we had a big effect on it, and
Mhm.
some good and some bad, but some that I saw was not necessarily going to be great for patients,
Right.
because there's
Right.
a lot, especially in New York, there was a lot of jealousy. Why should we, and also prejudice. Why should
Hmm.
we follow this Russian doctor? So there were other factions. We why not have us do it? Why have this other? And that has actually led to really the hospitals taking over. And in New York, it's
Hmm.
probably a good thing. And in where the model was in Connecticut, where the medical society had sponsored it, but that was Yale and Harvard.
Right.
So there was a built-in respect there. In New York, we don't have respect for anybody. So you really have to fight for everything.
That's true. That's true. My mom was a New Yorker, and so I know. Yeah, it's different. I mean, I'm a California person, and even living on the East Coast, very different. But yeah, there are so many nuances, and one thing that's so important too to understand is that healthcare is different in every state. The laws are different. The culture is different. The history of healthcare, hospitals in the West started, were started by nuns who were shipped from Italy to, because they were, probably in some famine or something, right? And started hospitals for, these, the 49ers, people emigrating across country that had no health care, Chinese laborers building the whole railroad system, etc. So completely different type of history, right? And so it's really important to, understand that perspective of New York and that evolution, and especially being a pioneer to start, I want everybody to listen again. Caryn started an HMO, right, with doctors, and you basically, it sounds like, were a broker up until that point. From what, 76 to 93, you were like running a I mean, I don't know, like you were like an agent for these doctors in some way, shape, or form,
Yeah. Well, I did
helping them.
everything, because I did everything from finding the locations, getting the equipment, hiring and training staff, and
Wow.
then, but of course, with nothing works without the patients. So
Right.
we had to get, number one issue was, could I deliver patients? And the more that became what I was doing, it led to, well, if I could have the insurance, if I could be the payer, as opposed to having to beg for patients,
Hmm.
then I would be able to uh, steer to, and the name of our tagline, it was all health, but the name of the tagline was, the difference is the doctor. And the idea was that the doctor, being the owner, would also make the policies that would be beneficial to the patients.
Mhm. And for folks that don't know, I mean, this was a time in the, you know, 80s to 90 into the 90s of huge change in healthcare delivery, the structure of healthcare. We had the HMOs starting up. We didn't have DRGs yet. It was a pay fee for service prior to HMOs. And there was, I'm not going to say there wasn't denials, right? There were, but it was a different kind of system
I'm
where,
Black. Oh, okay.
do you come back? Okay, I can see you. Where, the doctor ordered something, it got done, they got paid for it. It was,
Yes.
kind of a simple system, but then everything changed
Yeah.
very radically. And as we have seen, there's a lot of money in healthcare, but it's not all going to the doctors, the providers, nurse practitioners, or the patients.
Yeah. And I was lucky, I said, to a lot of, since these things were starting, there were a lot of meetings to go to. And especially being in the unions, where again, I wasn't in the women's unions. I was working with Teamsters and communication workers and post office employees, and so those people, I was again, the woman's job. It was considered the woman's job. I say my desk is the one at the back where they leave their coffee cups on as they're leaving, and they would say, "By the way, this person in the hospital, could you go to see them?"
Oh my goodness. Oh
So,
my goodness. So really you had to think out of the box. I mean, when I've had the great honor of knowing you for the last couple of years and getting to know you. And whenever I think of you, I think of, oh, this is somebody who really thinks outside the box. You know, is that because you've achieved a lot of things that are not conventional.
yeah. And so, throughout the starting of my business, when people would ask me what I did, I would say I'm a patient advocate. And so
Gotcha.
back from 76, when I started, that was the title that I gave myself.
Right.
And so I never wanted to be known as the person who worked for the doctor, even though
Right.
I was doing, and the doctors wanted me because they knew what I could bring to the table. But I didn't want to be known as the person who was working to make money for people. I wanted to
Right.
be the person who was working for the patients. And
Right.
that's like because of, who I was, how I was brought up.
Wow.
And then, so once I realized that managed care wasn't necessarily going to be the answer,
Hmm.
I started a new company. Again, as a patient advocate, that was how I introduced myself, gethealthhelp.com. And it's 3 words, GETHEALTH, like healthcare, and help, like help.
Hmm.
And so people could reach me through directories that I had with doctors who were sponsoring this. That was the way I was paying for it, so that it would be free to the patients.
Hmm.
And on the back of the directory, it would say, if you don't see what you want here, if you have other questions, call the patient advocate. And that was my number. And so I took those calls myself. People had a problem, I would go drive over to see them, uh,
Hmm.
see what I could do. And just as things were changing, I mean, those were working people that I was helping at those times. But then people
Hmm.
got older. So some people who I knew for a long time, relationships where somebody would have a chronic condition, say early diagnosis of Parkinson's, I would have to do the research and find out which were
Hmm.
the best places to take them, find out which doctors could work with them within their schedules, learn to understand where people were coming from when they told me their problems.
Right. Right.
Right? And then,
And healthcare is complex. I mean, I'm a nurse and I still have to research everything unless it's exactly in my wheelhouse of what I know. But yeah, I mean, it's growing. It's so incredibly complex. And, so to provide those kind of services as a layperson, although insider, right, in the healthcare industry, really takes a lot of energy and commitment. Your commitment level is like 10 out of 10, right, to these clients.
Yeah, and I
And
wasn't the
how was it working from
saying the word of advocate, that I wasn't the person
Mhm.
fighting, because the union was there to fight for the person, for their job, and I was
Right,
there to fight for them to get what they needed.
right.
People say, is that like a concierge type of thing? So, it's somewhat it is,
Mhm. Right,
that
right.
wasn't, really a fighting
But
person.
it's so much more efficient when you work also. I mean, because the other thing in common is like you're the only other advocate I can talk about unions with. And and so because you've got that really unique background, a lot of people don't they overlook that, if you can work with a union or a local at a national level, whatever level, then, and you offer some free services, free classes, or whatever it may be, you're going to have access to a whole group of people and they're going to be very loyal.
Yes.
And, and it's very relational, but then things may change if there's a whole infrastructure or leadership change. Everything could change overnight. I know we know about that too. So it's important to diversify. But I think again, like, you thought to yourself, where are the patients at? Oh, I can, why get one or two at a time when I can go to a union and get 5,000 or 2,000 or 10,000,
Yeah,
whatever,
yeah.
unions.
Well, 240,000 active employees, and
Good.
plus about a half a million retirees. So,
Right.
um,
Retirees, yeah, and I hope that unions, union retirees are really important, and I don't know how active some of these retiree associations are anymore. I know in the union I worked in, it just really depended by local, but I think that there's such a need, because that's also when people finish working, if that's their choice, that leaves a big void for them in their space of their life, and
yeah.
that social
No, and
aspect.
people don't realize how involved union members are, and people
Mhm,
who go to the meetings, the union members who go to the meetings and go for courses and get involved as shop stewards, and those people are icons. Those people have
mhm,
many skills. They hone their skills to be someone who can communicate to other people well, and
mhm,
also and negotiate with other people. That's what it's
mhm.
about, negotiating,
Right.
and also um, to be able to advocate for them, and then
Right.
also to advocate for themselves as they may see opportunities. So many of them are business people on the side. And
Mhm,
then, as they retire, especially like police officers who are retiring after 25 years, or teachers, and
mhm.
then they can, go into real estate. They may become authors and move to the south of France. And these are wonderful things that people can do when they have the ability, first of all, to have a pension, to have income.
Right.
So, when talking about an icon, I'm not going to say that this is somebody who, just worked, stayed home. People say it's okay, like, is the icon to their grandchildren? I don't
Mhm.
define it that way, because
Right.
I think, you had to, we're talking about people, didn't doesn't mean that they were famous all over the world, or that they made a lot of money at what they were doing. But
Mhm,
it's someone who accomplished, and that's why I said in the beginning, it's someone who accomplished something, that they became a leader to
mhm.
whoever, whatever group that was.
Right.
And, that's where I'm bringing up the word icon. So I'm not saying that every patient is appropriate for my business, or somebody that I
Mhm,
can help, because I decided after 25 years of doing that, that I wanted to work with certain people who would give me some satisfaction, personal satisfaction, that I had really changed their lives. That I wasn't just
mhm.
going to the doctor and, hearing all this terrible stuff about, sorry, we can't do anything for you, or you'll just
Right.
have to accept that you've, slowed down, that you can't do the things that you want to do. And I wanted to be able to say, no, no, this person, I know that this person has it in them to continue doing what they love
Mhm,
to do, or to move on to the next level. And I
mhm.
wanted to know, and I knew I was doing that with them, because they fought to have it. It wasn't me
Right.
giving it to that, telling them you can do it, you can do it. It was them saying, I can't stand this. I want to be able to still do what I did. And
Right.
I had to find a way. I would say, okay, I'll find a way. And we found ways.
That's beautiful. And I think, I mean, here we are, we're talking about patient advocacy, we're talking about business, entrepreneurship, pivoting, unions, ageism, right? And I do want people, if you're, younger, to, and I don't even know what that is because apparently I'm older now and I've, crossed, I don't know when I crossed that line. But, we're in a world where people are going to live to be 90, 100, right? So, you've got to have a plan for that, like last third of your life, right? Or whatever it may be, or the second, third career. I more or less change careers every 10 years, it's turned out. And, because what we change and evolve. And as we change and evolve, there's other things that are going to meet our needs. And, just, sometimes you need to move. Sometimes you want a different car. You want to have different experiences. You might decide you like going to theater, at the age of 50 or 35 or whatever it may be. So if, you're a younger millennial, Gen Z, watch this and, really learn and be aware about ageism and perception, right? There's a,
And perception, like
uh-huh.
this, being on the screen. Like here we are side by side. And I'm actually dressed to go to a party tonight for a group that I had taken from, it was almost going to be closed down, and we brought it back to life. And so for a couple of years, I was known as the person who had brought this organization back to life. And then I recently asked to move down from the chairmanship to now chair emeritus. And they
Mm-hmm.
put out a newsletter and
That's okay. We saw you a little frozen. We got little freezes. It's okay. We're going to roll with it.
so the title of the newsletter said, "Goodbye, Caryn." I said, "What do you mean goodbye?" And they
Right,
said
because
in
at a
the
certain age when you see that, you're like,
body, it
you're thinking
said,
one thing.
she's not retiring, she's doing something else. And I think people have a hard time understanding that I'm not doing something really different. People say, well, what is it you're going to be doing? And it's actually, this is just really continuing doing what I've been
Mhm,
doing, helping people in some way. And so
mhm,
it's not, where people say, okay, so you're going to be doing something different, like you're going to do a lot of golf. You'll be doing whatever you like to do. The people know I like to fish, so they say, you'll be fishing all the time.
right,
And I say, no, it's just that I'm not going to be lifting a wheelchair into my car or a walker into my
right,
car. I'm not going to be necessarily driving people myself. I'm not doing so well with my peripheral vision, and maybe with some of my reaction time. I had a few accidents in the past couple of years. Um,
right.
Things that I
You're
feel that I
adapting.
like to do, and feel that things that I really enjoy, like some of the, people when they're starting in business, they may take a lot of clients who are not necessarily the best fit for them, but they wanted to give it a try, whether it was a learning process for them or they just needed the money. And thankfully, I didn't have to do that for a long time, but
Mm-hmm,
even narrower now, because I
mm-hmm,
say, if I don't want to work 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, can
right,
I narrow this down to how do I make sure that I'm talking to the right people? And that's why I needed to change my name from Get Health Help, where people would say, I know what that is. That's my parents. That's the older person who
right,
or very sick and needs your services, to bring it to life and say, no, these are people who are aging icons, whether they're in a wheelchair, whether they're
mhm,
working from their hospital bed,
right.
but they're active there. Their mind is active.
Mm-hmm.
And so those are the people who I would be speaking to.
Absolutely. I mean, I could see my mother, she was in a wheelchair with MS, and, she was iconic. She just was. She was, of course, a New Yorker. And just, very active mentally, like sharp as, I don't know, anything sharper than me. That's for sure. And so one of the things, also that I'm hearing, listening to you about adapting, pivoting, um, when is that in that process, right, we are honing certain skills, certain um, abilities, but then we may also be losing some other things, or just desires, right? I mean, I'm 55. I don't want to do manual labor anymore. I've had a life of a lot of manual labor, being direct care nurse, or whether I was, climbing a Malibu hill with chainsaws, landscaping in my 20s in college, right? That's just, I love being physical, but I don't want to have that do that work. And I understand what you're saying. So, what I'm thinking is it comes to another concept that a really, well known marketer should taught me about dream clients, right? It's like, so what you're talking about is attracting your dream clients and honing in and saying, this is what I want to do, because it's very easy in, really any business, I would say, but I know in patient advocacy to, oh, I'm going to add this on, I'm going to add this on. Like I was, toying with medical billing, which I've decided, again, I've made a decision. I'm not going to do that directly. I'll contract that out and it'll still be part of my business. But I have no desire to sit on the phone with insurance companies and do that kind of battle, right? It's like that's not too gratifying for me. So there is a way to be gratified, fulfilled, and pivot and adapt or transition and have dream clients, meet your bottom line, whatever the goal is financially, and have meaningful work, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's what I'm hearing.
Yeah. And I always like to read magazines. I like to learn. That's why I said I like to go to a lot of meetings. I've been, involved in many organizations on board levels, even back to when the health reform movement started. I was one of the people who were given the opportunity to read the Affordable Care Act before it went out and make comments on it. And uh, I have a system of questionnaires that I use to speak to my patients, but also when I was working with the doctors. It would be like 10 questions. How do you figure out who's your perfect patient? Because that's how we would decide what was the focus of the presentation for that particular doctor. What did I have to build on? I wasn't going to give them the same services that was being offered across the street. It had to be about them. And I said, people have to can't be bait and switch. Has to be, what you say you're giving, that has to be what they're going to get. And that's going to be
Right,
you. So you have to know yourself. And so
right,
this questionnaire is, what are the things that are important to you? And the perfect patient was the person who accepted your treatment plan. They understood what you were
mhm,
talking about. They agreed that, yes, this is how they feel, this is what they're looking for. And number two was that they paid your fee. And we
right,
had to make sure that we were going after the right market. And so I wouldn't
right.
go after someone,
It
especially
matters.
knowing if you were taking insurance, what does the insurance pay before you go after them? One of the
Right,
hospitals I was called into, and they had been taking workers' comp cases, federal workers' comp cases. I said, look, you're never going to get paid. You're not going to be able to fight these claims. They had
mm,
thousands of people who were coming there because they had gotten known as the place that people could go and be treated. And of
right.
course, people needed to go there because those claims were not covered, and you weren't going to be able to fight the federal government to say you should have been covering
Yeah.
this, something that was never covered.
That's
Right.
not a
And,
viable business model, right? You have to diversify.
and then
You
the
absolutely
last
have to
thing is,
diversify.
and the big thing is that they recommend other people, that they're people
Hmm.
who have the ability and the wherewithal and that you can give them a tool to recommend you. So people are not going to be walking around thinking about you and telling everybody about you. But if you gave them something, whether it
Mm-hmm.
was a newsletter on a regular basis, I mean, these are all things that now lead to the social aspects of it. Being there
Right.
all the time in front of them. So whether it's, yes, they're not your client anymore, but maybe you're still sending them a a gift in the mail or a card on their birthday or whatever it was,
Right.
to make sure that they knew that you were still around and you cared about them. And then they
Right.
had something to say if it wasn't about the particular healthcare scare that they were talking about, but it was their birthday and they said, "Oh, and I got a birthday present from my doctor." That really made a way for them to
Right.
talk about you to their friends. And
Yeah, it makes that personal, and I just hope that people are also hearing that even in 2023 in this day and age, right? It's very important to have that personal touch. It's still important to mail a card, and more than it may be to send a text. And I think it's just important to know your audience, know your group. What do people like? I mean, especially as we age, our group, our social circle is going to change, might get smaller. Usually it does. People pass on, for whatever reason. And so things change. So that's really important, especially, at any age. But especially as your clients, if you are having older clients or clients that may be in a particular category of a chronic illness, um, there's you're never going to go wrong with a personal touch. You just aren't. Nobody's ever going to say, "Oh, why would she do that? Why would he send me a card? Why would he, call and say, "Hey, I want to just wish you happy birthday." Right? Relationships are important, and relationships mean you are relating. Us commenting on Facebook, liking each other's content, these parasocial relationships, that's what they're called, are not relationships, right? They're parasocial relationships sometimes, but so that's a really important point, Caryn. I thank you for that. And what do you think now, just quickly as we wrap up? I want to just ask you, post COVID, right? We went through COVID. Um, what do you think has changed, or have you seen any change in how people are prioritizing their time and energy and focus in your group of clients or your target audience?
I think, being alone, as we all had to be for this long period of time, that some people learn new skills, many, and I love being part of that, which
Mhm.
is why I'm in the process of writing a book, which collaborating with my friends and colleagues in writing the book. And that came out of somebody who just started a let's get together on the internet and talk since we're all alone in our pajamas, and moved
With bad
into
hair.
a and to being able to go out to speak. And a lot of people are talking about your authentic self. And I
Yeah.
think that's what really has helped and changed so many things for people, whether they're successful or not. I think in just the
Mhm.
happiness that they feel in being allowed to be their authentic self. And that
Mhm.
was always something, I had been told in the past, sometimes by lawyers who now actually refer to me, you smile too much.
Right.
Seems like you think this is a
Positive.
joke. Right?
Right.
And I take a lot of courses, like I said, and I'm doing a speaking course. And I said, I seem to have a hard time with my eyes jumping around when I'm speaking online or when I'm trying to do something that's recording.
Right.
And my coach said, well, why not just address it and say, this is how my eyes are. My eyes happen to slant down, and
Right.
they're hooded, and I have some puffiness here. So it looks like I'm not really looking at you, but I am.
Right.
And so
Right.
just take a sort of joke out of it. And so people won't be looking and saying, where is she looking?
Right, right. And it's, I mean, that's the other thing too, right? I mean, it's I'm a mover and a talker, and I don't stand still. I mean, I've been presenting in front of people since I was 14, and I'm just a mover. So this adaptation to Zoom, you know, is so challenging because I'm somebody who moves around, because that's what you do also to engage people when you're live, unless you're having some fireside chat. So yeah, there are different challenges that you have to overcome. But at the same time, I see people who are like basically terrible on camera, um, and they're wildly successful. So I think it speaks to the authenticity, um, being authentic, honoring yourself, being self-aware, and being responsive to that self-awareness, right? And it doesn't matter where you're at, if you're 90 years old, 95, 85, 70, whatever it is, if you just got divorced, you just got laid off, you've decided you're going to make a career change, it's never too late. Today is always the right day. Today and now is the right time. And just
Yes,
go
and
out there and
especially
try it.
many patient advocates come from the place that they were the patient, or
Right.
they took care of and helped a patient that they loved dearly. And so that's, coming from their heart. So I think
Mhm,
you'll see, I always say, for about aides, people who act
mhm.
as personal attendants, you can't do this job unless you love people. You don't do it for the money. There's
Right.
other things that you could do, whether it's dishwashing before you
Mhm,
would do caregiving. It's a,
mhm.
a really personal, sometimes, very emotionally draining
Mhm.
thing to do. And you have to really just have that passion to do it. So again, back to passion. And that's how I hope that
Yeah.
people will, be proud of their authentic self and follow their passion.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's beautiful. I mean, really, as I think, as I believe, as we age, we get to it because we all go through a lot in our lives, and unexpected changes or plan changes, whatever they may be. And it just becomes more and more important to live the life we want to live. Like I say, live a life worth living, and start doing that now. And it's okay to make mistakes and fumble. Like some people are not comfortable in front of the camera. I wasn't either. I just said to myself, I have to do this. I have to get on TikTok, you know, during the pandemic or right before the pandemic. And I still am not perfect, right? But you just do it. It doesn't matter. You just get like I say, you fail till you succeed, and the faster you fail, the faster you get to success. And, you got to understand that nobody's just like shooting to stardom in any career, anything we're doing,
Yeah,
right?
so we'll see if I how I do on my singing, because I do need
Absolutely.
to sing. I did want to be a singer, and
I love it.
uh, I do improv now, which helps to get out of yourself, because it's you're yourself, but in a imaginary circumstance.
I love improv. That's
There's a
another
lot of
great one.
ways to get at, to learn how to get out of yourself, and just to get appreciated and get some applause out there.
Yeah.
And so
And to be uncomfortable, right? The other thing is like also what we talk about not directly, but is being comfortable, being uncomfortable, and taking risks. Like just I embrace being uncomfortable or awkward. It's going to be okay. Thank you so much for
yeah.
joining me, Caryn. And I really can't tell you how much I appreciate you joining me on the podcast here. For folks, again, if you want to reach Caryn Isaacs, tell them how they can reach you, please.
Yes. So I offer anyone a free hour to speak to me on the phone, mostly because I love to talk on the phone. And my number, and I like to really hear the story. I want to hear exactly what you've done so far, what's been happening, what you tried. And so my phone number is 347-965-9222. It's 347-965-9222. And you can look me up at agingicon.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Caryn. All right. Well, we're going to wrap it up, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. If you're watching this on YouTube, please subscribe. If you're watching it anywhere else, please follow. Share this recording, share the video, because this is very valuable information. Thank you so much, Caryn.
Thank you. Thank you, Adrienne. Have a good day.
All right.